Howdy all. Happy Friday. We are here. We are going to talk about some things in the NHL today. We have Kevin Allen aboard, and I want to start with this because I'm a student of history, love historical movies, and today is obviously the 77th anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor. And I've never seen sort of such a wide disparity in terms of the quality of a movie on a particular subject as this is probably late 60s, early 70s. There was a movie called Tora, 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 which was half Japanese, half American, filmed by two different directors, and it was the backstory on the attack on Pearl Harbor. Great cast, really, really good movie, well done, completely historically accurate, great movie. You contrast that with the Michael Bay disaster, Pearl Harbor, the Ben Affleck movie. And I know, this was like post-Titanic, where they were trying to have the historical incident as the background, and they had a fictitious love story triangle type of thing, like in Titanic. But you put up one movie against the other, and it's unbelievable how bad one was and how good the other one was. Yeah, there are other examples of that particular type of thing where there were like two or three movies made about Christopher Columbus at the 500th anniversary, like in 1992. There was a Gerard Depardieu movie. There was a Tom Selleck movie. One of them was good and the other ones were bad. It says I don't understand the mindset of these movie studios where they think that they can just make a movie about a particular subject that's going to make money. I think it needs more than that.
Well, but anyway, not surprising. You and I are going to disagree. I thought Tora, Tora, Tora was a terrific movie, and I loved it. Obviously, that was right in my wheelhouse. I was in high school when that came out, and it was a terrific movie. But I didn't have any issues with the Pearl Harbor. It wasn't a great movie, but it was a great popcorn flick. But my only point really is that, and I have this argument with people all the time, movies are not supposed to be historically accurate. They're fiction. Yeah. Right. If you want a historically accurate presentation, watch a documentary.
Yes.
That's what that is. Like people say all the time, "Well, I didn't like that movie because it didn't follow what really happened." Well, I don't want that from a movie. Having a love story in Pearl Harbor, maybe they didn't execute it particularly good, but it was a good popcorn flick. There was a lot of great action sequences in that movie. I loved the flying, the dog fighting. There was something to it. Now, was it a perfect movie? Well, of course not. No. But you can't just say, one was horrible and one was good. They were two different kinds of movies. So,
yeah, Kevin, you raise a good point about, they're not historically accurate. It's a movie, not, go see a documentary. And I hadn't really thought about it that way because I'm that kind of person who tends to be a little critical about things like, wait a second, that's not what reality was. But then movies who do things should be saying, based on the story, this is a dramatized, like they shouldn't be all about the what was the movie with Ben Affleck with the Iran and getting the
Argo, where they completely eliminated the Canadians being the heroes.
Exactly. Those are things like, come on, like really, like it gets a little goofy. And there's a whole host of them. I think if you're going to completely rechange history, then don't even associate it with history.
Well,
Peter, you're smarter than that. Like,
well, not really.
Yes, you are. You are smart.
You need like something in front of the screen when the movie starts to remember that. Oh, wait, they may have taken dramatic license here.
When you plunk down your money to go in, you're seeing fiction. You understand that. Like, you have to be told in a sentence that, hey, that movies aren't historically accurate. Like, literary. The expression literary license, that sort of thing. Like, come on. I've had this argument before with people. When I walk into a movie, I just want to be entertained. Like, I'm not looking.
No, I agree. I understand that. Sometimes you just think about things a little differently. I don't know. I'm just one of the, if I can't complain, I don't know, having fun.
Not fully accurate. Just letting you know now in case you weren't sure.
Well,
which one?
Titanic, not fully accurate.
Oh yeah, there was no Jack Dawson. There was no.
Yeah, I know. I hated Titanic, by the way. I hated that movie with the passion of a thousand suns.
You're heartless. I mean, I love Titanic just for Kate Beckinsale, and the only reason
Kate Winslet, really?
Or Kate Winslet, excuse me. And I only have a begrudging respect for Pearl Harbor because of Kate Beckinsale. So it must be the name Kate. But the funny thing is, like, one of my favorite movies of all time is extremely historically inaccurate, and that's Braveheart. The big set piece battle never took place. It took place, but it was a bridge. It was not this wide open battle between the Scottish and the English. So it was, and they used dramatic license and suspension of disbelief and all those nice little movie tricks. But yeah, I mean, you're right, Kevin. You want to see something completely accurate, watch a documentary, watch the professors talk about it. If you're expecting historical accuracy out of Mel Gibson or Ben Affleck, you're probably not going to get it. Anyway, okay. Let's start. Peter, you lead us off. Jan, you follow him in terms of the introductions. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Friday, December 7th, 2018.
I'm Peter Tessie in Winnipeg.
I'm Jan Levine.
Kevin Allen, USA Today Sports.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. We have a number of things to talk about, but we'll start with this. The NHL Board of Governors meetings were this week in Sea Island, Georgia. I guess is it out near Atlanta, Kevin? I don't know. I've never been to Sea Island, but anyway, that's beside the point. And a number of things came up, and we'll focus on two of them. First, the rubber stamp of the new Seattle franchise, yet to be named. The thing that came out that was in dispute was whether they would be starting in 2020 or 2021. It's going to be 2021, so that puts off the expansion draft until June of that year. Kev, there was no suspense here. It was going to happen, and we just knew it was going to happen.
No, I mean, and the league is really excited about this, as much so as they were about Las Vegas. And the success of the Golden Knights, I think, just even makes it, a better deal. And, expansion is really a great thing. It's almost kind of lost now. But the NHL is still a gate revenue driven league. So, if you can bring in more fans coming into, one more arena, it just continues to drive the revenues upward. So, it's a good thing for players. There's now, more jobs and, there's certainly enough talent to fill that team. I would predict this though. And I said this in my story this week. I do not think that the Seattle franchise is going to get nearly the number of deals that the Vegas Golden Knights got. I don't think GMs are going to. I think they're going to draw the line. They're not going to give in, a draft pick and a prospect and another player, so you don't take, John Smith. I think they're just going to say, look, this is my list. Take your guy and move on, because I think all of them feel like they were hurt more than they needed to be. It seemed like a good idea at the time. For Minnesota to give up what they got, and then you look around and they lost two guys when all they needed to do was lose one. So I think they'll be a little smarter because they've been to school, they've been through this before, and they've seen how it's going to work. And I also think that George McPhee is going to be involved because he doesn't lose a player, so he could be the destination place that players get parked.
That almost seems unfair. That Vegas is going to profit off. They're going to double profit.
I'm with you on that. I've thought about this too, and it does seem like they're going to get added benefit. But first in is always seems to serve a team well, and so I think this is going to be a good thing. The only loser in this, it might be fitting because they've had such a rough go as Arizona. It's an easy drive from Arizona to LA. It's LA and or Vegas and Arizona is not far. I mean, they're a West team, and here we go. They're moving into the Central. So, it was the logical move of all the teams that could be moved. It made more sense for Arizona to go than anyone else.
Well, I mean, this brings up the question of the long-term viability of the Coyotes. When you think a little bit of an echo here. Let me mute myself for a second. because usually that makes it go away. The long-term viability of Arizona, I mean, the building situation still hasn't been straightened out, and there's been talk about Houston as a possible avenue, and Jan, I want you to talk about this first. Bob McKenzie brought up Austin, Texas as something which is totally out of the blue in terms of a potential venue, but apparently there's some sort of there might be some sort of resistance going to Houston. I don't know if it's ownership or government or whatever. And Austin, Texas was brought up as a burgeoning market and an area it's the capital of Texas. They apparently there would be they would have to be waiting until a building is built because they only have an AHL building right now. But I don't know about that, but there are other options if Arizona isn't viable, like Kansas City, like San Antonio. I mean, there's other.
You're breaking up there, Mike.
Portland. What's that, Peter?
So you're breaking up a little bit.
Yeah.
Sorry, but Chan, talk about then your feelings on Seattle.
I mean, I happen to have no problem with Seattle. I mean, Kevin can talk better than I would also, but, Quebec had always been rumored as being an option, and it seems pretty evident that the NHL really doesn't have a great desire to move back there, despite having a decent amount of fans that prefer them and having a ready, set arena. Kansas City clearly was the other one, and the Islanders were using them as leverage. And as somebody who lives 10 minutes from the Coliseum, I mean, that was one that was used a lot. And granted, they ended up going to Barclays, which, as we've seen, has proven to be an absolutely huge mistake.
Right.
And I know there's a lot of reasons, what happened on the island here. And, B.D. Gallup and a bunch of other guys did a whole bunch of columns. And there's a lot of rumors that literally the last straw, honestly, was a $10 million sewage package that the government here on Long Island wouldn't pay for. And that created was like the last straw, which was ridiculous. I mean, I have a lot of friends who are Islander fans who are ecstatic that they're coming back to the Coliseum. And as you saw the reaction from last Saturday night's game, that's clearly the place they should be. I mean, you can talk, Mike, also Hamilton, Ontario being another place they've talked about being an option, but I can't see them going there. So to me, Austin, Texas doesn't really hit the bar. Well, I mean, pun intended, I guess, given the number of bars that are probably in Austin because it's a college town, the University of Texas there. To me, Houston makes a lot of sense. It's a ready-made market. There's an arena there. It's been rumored a little bit. The ownership that's there wants to bring them there. I mean, the point is, as Peter said, Arizona, and you said, the arena deal hasn't been finalized yet. There's always been tons of trouble with them. If you're going to put them in the Central, having them to go to either Kansas City or going to Austin makes an enormous amount of sense, given where they are proximity, and they get an automatic rival immediately with Dallas based upon them being in Texas. So I don't know if they're ever going to move out of Arizona. I mean, Gary Bettman doesn't seem to be too interested in having them shift locations again, despite all the rumors. But Seattle is a market that's a ready-made market. I mean, you get the Pacific Northwest. You're relatively close to Vancouver. I mean, Portland is not that far away from there. They got a rabid fan base. I'm hoping they do a good job in terms of the naming that they come up with. I mean, given Totems has been the name, it doesn't really move the needle for me. But if they go to the Seattle Supersonics old colors with the green and the gold, that's going to be an immediate marketing win associated with them. At least to me, I personally think some of the mock-ups I've seen on the green and the gold look unbelievable from some people that put some stuff out. So to me, I think Seattle just made an enormous amount of sense. And as you saw from the NHL, the way they handled this, they wanted them in Seattle and did everything possible to get them into Seattle as soon as possible.
Anything but the Sockeyes or the Kraken. Peter,
I love the Kraken.
I kind of like the Kraken. I think it's a little more gimmicky, but I think it's going to be something like Sasquatch.
I don't mind seals either. Seals.
Kevin, I'll have to tell you my
the golden seals. You have the green and the gold works with the seals again.
Yeah. So here, I'll playing the role of Russ Cohen right now. Here's the thing.
I'm telling Russ.
Here's the thing. I think Portland is a possible landing spot for Arizona as much as an area such as Houston could be. The reason being is one thing, if the NHL studies markets and really does a good look, they will see that there's a very interesting line within MLS that plays very well with soccer between the Portland Timbers, the Seattle Sounders, and the Vancouver Whitecaps.
Right.
They have their own little Cascadia Cup kind of thing. It's actually called that. And the fan base is very, very big because of the geo reasoning or the geo positioning in that. One of the interesting things, right? And you get out to the West, and it's hard for you guys when you come out here. Like, there's nothing around us. There's nothing. The closest city to Winnipeg in driving is Minneapolis, and it's 7 hours away. How many major cities on the East Coast, even the Eastern Midwest, can you drive to within 7 hours? Yeah. You sort of forget that. So for Seattle to help succeed, an inevitable move to Portland could be a very good thing. They actually have 2 facilities that could work there. Yeah. If they needed to.
Yeah, and the NBA building, but I don't know if it's NHL capable.
I don't know if it is too. I've been to the Rose Garden. It's a nice building. It's probably I can't remember the capacity, but I think it's closer to like the MTS Center size, around 15, 16, as opposed to the bigger size, which might be fine depending on your ticket price point and stuff. But then you've got an I-5, 3.5 hours away. Boom, boom, boom. Like, nice little drive, 6 hours from Vancouver to Portland, Oregon, depending on your border weight. There's a lot of really fun things. And what's super interesting, and we know that, Mike, you'll know this from the Maple Leafs, when they did the division realignment, they knew all the snowbirds would be going down, and that's why they kept Ottawa and Montreal and Toronto with Tampa and Florida, because people would be down there and go to those games. What did they do in Vancouver? And Calgary and Edmonton? They time games so that they'll play LA, Anaheim, and then Phoenix, so that people can come down to a little sun destination and stuff. Now they can throw Vegas in there. Well, you take Vegas to LA is only a 4.5 hour drive. It's totally and it's longer to actually get to Phoenix. So it's a total, like, you can remove Arizona out of that equation, because you've still got 3 and 4 teams if you consider San Jose there.
Yeah.
And you could move them up to Portland and have a great regional thing here. And that should be what they want to do. It still leaves the variable of how do you balance out a possible rabid marketplace in Quebec City and getting a team there. And until a team is in dire straits like the Atlanta Thrashers were and no viable option, well, you're not going to see any party in Quebec be able to buy for pennies on the dollar compared to expansion fees.
Well, that's what I just want to touch on this, and then we'll move on. Kev, when Gary Bettman comes out and he says the word disappointed in regards to the Ottawa Senators situation, where now Eugene Melnyk is suing I think his name is Ruddy, who was part of the LeBreton Flats situation, and he's building condos that were supposed to be near where the ground would be for the new arena, and apparently there was condos that were part of the funding of the arena, and now that it's a whole mess. I look at the situation, and it's like, you've got a brand new building in Quebec City. I can't, maybe I'm just drawing a line from point A to point B, but I start to think if there's continuing to be resistance over the next year or two, moving Ottawa to Quebec City seems to be a pretty easy solution to a bad problem.
Well, I mean, I guess that certainly would be possible. What I would say about Quebec City is this: like, I think eventually the NHL will go there, but I think Gary Bettman wants to go on his terms. And right now, Quebec City doesn't do anything, or doesn't do what Seattle or Portland or what Vegas did for the league, and that is to expand the footprint. You're not going to grow the game in Canada anymore. It can't get any bigger than it is in Canada. Right. So I think eventually, at some point, once they get everything, now will be after Seattle comes in, we're going to be even now. We have the same number of teams in the West and the East. So, no team in the East was going to come in. Plus, we've had the dollar disparity. So there were a lot of reasons not to go to Quebec City. But I don't think it's not that the NHL doesn't think it'll work there. I think it just feels like there's no need to go there now. And the one thing I would say, and I know it's been kind of talked about, is like, can the NHL go too far? They already got, more teams than, the NFL. Well, yeah, they can go further because their situation's a lot different. Like the NFL, their revenue is so huge, they want to keep their number of teams down so they can share all this great revenue. The NHL is in a position where, to increase their revenue, they got to keep bringing in more teams, because they need gate revenue to sort of expand their footprint and to get a sort of a greater piece of the advertising dollar. So I'd see them going to 34 teams for sure, maybe 36 at some point. No, I don't know that it's going to be in the next. I'm talking down the road a little bit, but maybe not in our lifetime. But I see that growing. I mean, that's the way they're going to view things.
Yeah, and there's been talk about European expansion. I don't know how realistic that is. Again, I don't know about that. I do know this though. I was just because I think Jan, you referenced Hamilton. There is not going to be a second team in Toronto. I really doubt they're going to go down that road because I think they would be going to war with their most profitable franchise. The Leafs will not want another team in their market, and I think it will take away from their profitability. So if you're going to have, you're going to have basically TSN and Sportsnet fighting against the league that they cover. I don't think it's going to happen. I really don't. But
okay. And I'm not disagreeing with you. I mean, it's just been the name has been rumored. That's the only reason why I brought it up. I don't foresee them going there at all. I mean, the same thing in the NFL. I think it's the cost to entry that's probably a barrier as well. I mean, look at the $650 in the NHL. It's at least double or more than that at least, and then needing stadiums compared to what you need now as arenas. So it's a little bit different to entry, and NHL needs to expand just to basically raise the market price.
And the one thing, there's not going to be any kind of end around here where people are going to go after existing franchises and try to get them on the cheap. I will bet anything that Gary Bettman says, well, if you want to move from Arizona to Houston, if it's not the same ownership, then the price is $650 million. He's not going to let them. It's almost like having a coupon. Oh, I can get an existing team for half the price. It's like a used car. It's not going to work that way.
No. Well, the cost of in general of franchises has made it like I know of an instance where an NHL owner was interested in buying an NFL team, and he's a billionaire, but he needed help. He needed financial backing. He needed someone else to come in with him because he may be worth $1 billion, but that's the cost of those things. So he needed other people, and he couldn't get together a group to make it happen. So that's becoming an issue as well, and that's probably going to be an issue for Quebec City as well. If it's $650 now, what's the next expansion team going to be? Just probably the entry fee alone might be too much.
Yeah, probably $750, something like that. The other thing that came out from the Board of Governors meeting was the projection that normally comes out at this time of year of what the cap might be, and we know, based on escrow, based on the I can't remember there's the calculation that they usually have, but it's $83 million was the number that came out. Now that can be adjusted, but Kev, if it's 83, I think we're gonna have a very busy trade deadline because you're going to have teams that are going to have space next year. And I think the ability of teams to move players that have term left on their deals will be easier if they think that cap figure is going to be as high as that.
Well, yeah, but I think people are going to save their money a little bit just to kind of cover their own teams. And, we're reaching the point too, and this is the point I've been making for a couple of years when people talk about, you won't be able to afford, 2 or 3 players making $10 million. I had this discussion with the GM who said that the way he looks at it is, you take the top of the bottom of your 23-man roster and you take 8 guys and you tell yourself, okay, I'm going to have fill 8 spots for about $8 million. Now I got $75 million to get 15 other guys. Now that's $5 million a guy. So, we're reaching the point where you can afford 3 $10 million players. You can do that. That's just the way it is. And they've been kind of hoping and counting on that's what's going to happen. And it looks like, the game is growing to the point where they're going to be able to do that. Now, the question is, will players push and try to make that the $10 million players 11 and $12 million players? So we know that the answer to that, the answer is yes. So it'd be just a matter of whether they're going to be able to hold the lines on the Austin Matthews of the world.
Yeah, Toronto will be very happy with the 3 8-figure players. Now, Jan, the Rangers really have to be licking their chops here because with the empty cap space that they're going to have going into free agency next year and guys like Panarin out there, and if the cap goes up to 83, we know that they're not shy about spending money. They're going through this sort of semi-retool rebuild that they're going through right now. I mean, they're having more success on the ice than I think all of us thought they were going to have. But if the cap goes up that much and they're clearing, guys like Kevin Hayes, who's making $5 million, and maybe a few other players, they're going to be big players in July.
I mean, that seems to be the plan. I mean, I wrote a whole blog on this week when the news came out about the rise from 79.5 to 83 mil. So as of now, New York's got 15 players under contract, 10 forwards. The longest term signed to a big deal is Mika Zibanejad, who's signed through 2020, 21, 22.
Right.
You also have Kreider, Nemesnikov, Strome, VC, Fast, and Bolesky all signed through next season. And you have Anderson, Hedel, and Howden all in their first year of the ELCs. Right. So they'll be fine in terms of kind of utilization. Then when you talk on defense, the big guys are Shattenkirk, Stahl, and Smith signed through next year. And then Brady Shea signed through 23-24. You have Lundqvist signed through 2021, and Georgiev signed next year. So basically the total of those contracts, when you add in the dead cap space for Girardi next year and the assumption of the split between Strome and Spooner, the Rangers have used about $61.5 million, so giving them about $21.5 million of cap space to play with. Now, they could easily, obviously, Panarin is the guy that's been mentioned. You've already seen what he's going to want in the $10 million range. Mark Stone has been the other one that I think if they don't get Panarin, Stone will be the second guy they go after. The big question now becomes clearly what you do with Kevin Hayes. I mean, Hayes will be a free agent after the season. There's been enough whispers and rumors that he wants to stay. The rise in the cap may enable them to try to go after him to stay because of the fact that they have the cap space available. Zuccarello is likely going to be gone after the year, and he's one of those guys you talked about, Mike, that could be a very attractive piece. The other piece you have to talk about also is the restricted free agents. Buchnevich, Fogarty, Lettieri, Nieves, Clayson, and D'Angelo and Pionk. Now, the big boys are going to be Buchnevich, D'Angelo, and Pionk. I figure those guys will probably go from 2.7 mil to about 8.5 million. When you add in the other guys, you probably use about $9-10 million of cap room there, which means you probably have enough to get one of Panarin or Stone. If you're going to want to bring Hayes back, you may have to move somebody else that's already under contract to try to free up a little bit of room. And clearly, we'll put it with numbers because we don't know where the guy's going to end up. If you're going to sign Buchnevich long-term, if you're going to go bridge deal, same with Pionk. If they're going to try to move Brendan Smith and try to buy him out. But yeah, they're clearly going to be big players in Panarin or Stone. If not Panarin or Stone, the other guy obviously is going to be Erik Karlsson that got rumored a lot because they clearly need a guy who's more of a number one blue liner to take over. So could they be players on both of them? Yeah. But in order for them to be players on Panarin, Stone, as well as Karlsson, they're going to have to move another contract, and that reduces the likelihood of Kevin Hayes signing after January to a longer-term deal.
And Peter, I think that Kevin Cheveldayoff would pop a bottle of champagne if the cap goes up that much. It would alleviate a little bit of the pressure. I mean, we know that Connor and Line and Trouba, I mean, it keeps going and going. Yeah. But the more cap space that there is, the more he has a little more flexibility. Yeah,
this gives him. He probably, I don't know if he's popping champagne yet, but he's probably, sitting back and breathing a little easier. The Jets have a projected salary cap next season starting before of 56 million. Well, that doesn't include Line Connor. So who are both basically making $1 million a year right now, 925.
Right.
So you estimate there maybe around close to 16 million. So now you've got 7 million in cap space, and you've got to re-sign Tyler Myers, Ben Sherratt, and Jacob Trouba.
Yeah.
Things just got real complicated. That's how it is. So adding an extra $4 million on there, whatever it is, three and a half, is going to make things a lot easier, but it's not going to solve the problems.
How much do you think Kyle Connor will get, Peter?
I'm estimating between 6 and 7.
You think he's getting the money they just gave to Nylander, that type of money?
Depends if he hits 30 goals. If he hits 30 goals, he is.
I think he's getting more than that. I think he's getting $8 million a year. I mean, I was at the game Sunday night. Connor was probably the best player on the ice for them Sunday night against the Rangers.
Yeah,
he was brilliant. So I mean, I think he's still seeing Henrik Lundqvist in his sleep though, because he got robbed about 6 times in that game.
Yeah, he did.
But Connor, I think, is getting more than $6 to $7 million in my opinion.
And this is where we'll talk about this forever until next summer regarding like with the Leafs. I mean, we know Matthews is probably going to get in the McDavid area, 11 and a half, 12 and a half, something like that on an 8-year deal. There's a lot of talk coming around in Toronto right now about Marner and maybe even Matthews following the trend of Taves and Kane and Stamkos and Tavares coming out of entry level and signing a 5-year deal for a little bit less. It's still going to be a whopper of a deal. Now, I don't think the Leafs would want to do that. I think they want to get them locked up as long as they possibly can. But if it's a question of, you have Tavares at 11 million, then you have Matthews at 12 and Marner asking for between 8 and 9 at least, that's 40% of your cap. And then what are you going to pay everybody else? That's why a lot of people think Nylander eventually will get traded next summer after the big bonus, and they won't be able to re-sign Jake Gardiner. So yeah, it's, the whole cap figure, the whole amount that teams are going to be able to work with, it's going to, and especially with all the RFAs that are coming up next summer, it's going to be really, really interesting to see what happens.
Hey, Kevin, I have 2 questions for you on this, and you can probably answer better. What do you think this does related to the escrow between the league and the players? And then B, also, how does the rise impact the potential lockout? Does it make it a bit more likely, seeing that we have this constant rise in the cap every year, or that sides, or is it just more related to all the other ancillary components that have been the big sticking points?
Well, I mean, I think we are going to have a lockout. You're already starting to, get that feel. I mean, just what, to me, the indicators are the World Cup. The fact that we haven't seen a World Cup, the players have resisted, coming together with the league on that. It's just an indication that they're trying to let the league know that, they're really unhappy. The escrow is such a huge factor, but here's the problem with that issue. There's nothing can be done about it. I mean, we all live with the escrow of our homes. We understand why we have that. And the same thing, you can't have a salary cap without escrow. And I know what the players would like to say is that, you've got to be able to figure out what you can spend and not go over it so that we don't have to take money out. Well, that's impossible to do. So I don't see that there's any way of reconciling that. And I don't know where they're going to go with that particular issue, but that is a major issue because it's going to be difficult for players to accept ever that they're taking that much out of their paychecks. And we all know that the teams will overspend. They'll keep pushing it, knowing that if they do go beyond that, they'll get a refund back.
I somehow think in the new CBA there's going to have to be some. I think there's going to be another compliance buyout because there are so many teams that are putting them up against the cap that I don't know how they alleviate that pressure.
Yeah,
but the lockout, the salary cap has been rising every year. I mean, they damped down salaries to 39 mil if you remember in 05-06. Right. And it's gone up, I think, 100 and go by next year it'll be up 110% in a 15-year span, which that's really not a huge rise by comparison. But the fact that we're actually talking about how $83 million is a quote-unquote big number is fairly shocking. Take a look at the NBA and the NHL and see what the salary caps are in those leagues, and then come back to the year.
So, TV revenue, right?
Yeah.
And
I mean, again, my piece in the World Cup is, Kevin, is the issue in terms of insurance, is in terms of the payment for the players. I mean, what's the sticking point? Because honestly, and also I'm also shocked that they don't have another Team North America. Because to be honest with you, that was probably the best part of the tournament last time was the under 23.
I love that. It was fun. But the the issue is that the players simply don't want to engage on anything. They want the league to know that they were unhappy with what happened with the Olympics, and they just don't want to get involved in that. They want to go to the Olympics. That's their thing, and they didn't like how that came down.
The Olympics are a bargaining chip, and the NHL, the owners have made it.
Well, one thing I would say on this, they missed an opportunity last time around. If they would have said, put the Olympics in the contract to get us back playing again when we got to the very end, I think the league would have given in on that. I really do.
Yeah.
No, go ahead, Peter.
I was just going to say the World Cup of hockey, it's terrible. I don't want to watch. I don't want to watch teams that are brought together in training camp to battle out something when I'm about to go and watch 10 months of hockey that means something to me. This is a made up thing. It's not consistent. At one point during the Cold War, it was a wonderful thing when it was the Canada Cup, and people were playing for national pride in a different political climate.
Well,
you know what? You know, if you're going to do it, make it a Russian team with Putin faces on the jersey and an American team with Trump on the other, and we'll all sit back and buy tickets because it's trash.
Kevin will attest to the fact that I'm the most cynical person in the world, and even I was entertained by Team North America.
Oh, I was too. There's nothing
and Team Europe wasn't that bad either.
Yeah, that's one team out of the whole bunch. It's a creative idea, but frankly, you know what? The NHL has to give up on deciding that it is the sole owner and controller of what's best for hockey, because it's also screwed up a ton of things for hockey over its lifespan. It doesn't know everything. The International Ice Hockey Federation has a stake. The Olympics have a stake. I understand the NHL's beef with the Olympics. I think, in fact, the best thing the NHL could do is keep hammering it to the IOC, because what's happening is we may not even have a Winter Olympics next year because there's only two places bidding, and apparently one of them is getting cold feet on it, and that it's setting off repercussions through that no one wants the expense of it. So if you're not going to give out money to the people who are taking the risk, just like the cities and the countries who are doing it, you shouldn't be giving it to the players, or the NHL should be asking for that. And that's the bargaining chip. But if they're going to make everything about money for them, they're missing the boat too. And
the issue with the Olympics is all the venues that they build that sit fallow, and the amount of money that's supposedly being brought in as revenue isn't really ending up as revenue. And that's the big issue.
There's no revenue.
Well, I mean, Calgary held a referendum on whether they wanted to make a bid for, I think it was 2026, and they still had the existing, some of the existing sites from '88, and they didn't even want to do it, even though the financial hit wouldn't have been as much as, say, Vancouver. I mean, they don't, I think that.
So here's the difference with Vancouver and Calgary. Calgary had legacy stuff that's there, but they couldn't use McMahon Stadium for anything because it's terrible, and it may be minus 30 outside the day they want to do their opening or closing ceremonies. Their hockey rink is unsuitable for what they want, and that was the excuse to build this new one, which too bad for them, but it could have worked. Vancouver is different because yes, the infrastructure that went in was hugely costly. The city of Vancouver doesn't run any debt because real estate is so bloody expensive there. And the things that they've turned it into other things. They're not sitting dormant like the remnants of Greece or Rio, of Athens and Rio. They've used this stuff. It's moved on. They've sold the real estate. They've made money. Like there's tax money coming in that's going to be legacy. It still cost money up front, and it wasn't the best deal. But long term, there's no smoking crater of abyss like Quebec's paying off still for the 76 summer games with Montreal. And it was necessary infrastructure anyways. There's no necessary infrastructure for other places like that because the real estate isn't the same as the craziness of Vancouver.
There's a lot to unpack with what Peter just talked about, but I feel like I'd like to try.
Sure.
Just because I think a lot of your points are valid. Like the intent of the Olympics, I think when it started was to be a kumbaya event where everybody got their arms around one another, and in a spirit of cooperation, we held a athletic competition. And that competition today is still an unbelievable grand experience. I've covered a lot of Winter Olympics and a couple of Summer Olympics, and it's an amazing event, and it's so much bigger than our little corner of the world. Our 330 million people in the U.S. and 30 whatever it is in Canada is small by comparison. When I cover the Olympic Games, my readership grows 100-fold. Like people all over the world, read my stories. It's a huge, huge event. But like anything else in the world today, it's gotten out of hand. And Peter's right on the money where, instead of having it in the spirit of cooperation, it's a cash grab for the IOC. And that, it is important that the NHL kind of calls them on it, and that the cities say, we're not putting up with this anymore, because, it should be sort of a joint event, and instead of the IOC making demands, we should be making demands on the IOC, because the event itself is still great.
Yeah, I like Kevin.
The way
You'll
it's
never
run
see
is a disaster, and for selfish reasons, I want the Olympic hockey tournament to go on because America now has Matthews, Eichel, and Larkin to play center.
Yes.
So there'll be a much more competitive team in 2000
and Connor Hellebuck in goal and a lot of good defensemen, and
the fun part is, I guess, with China now, with obviously the NHL making more inroads there, that would seem to make it a bit more likely that they would be in the next Olympics as opposed to what went on in South Korea. So you can't have both ends of the spectrum and both sides of the coin. You're gonna have to pick one of them here. And if you're attempting to grow the game and then say, "Oh, I'm sorry, we're not going to go play there," you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot right away.
Right. Yeah, and they do. You're absolutely right. They do want to go to China. They've spent a lot of time over there. They want the marketing dollars. In China, a lot of NBA stuff gets sold, and they would like a lot of NHL stuff to get sold over there. So I think they are going to end up in China. I think that's just how it's going to work, and I think they know they're going to give in to the players in the next collective bargaining agreement. But I think they're going to try to get reduced contract maximums. I mean, they're going to be shooting for 5-year deals. I don't think they'll get that, but I think that's what they'll shoot for.
Okay, I want to move on to a couple different things before we end the show. I was watching this game last night intently. Obviously, the Leafs and the Red Wings, and the Toronto fan base had a collective gasp in the second period when Nicholas Kronwall, who was no stranger to big hits, hit cleanly Austin Matthews and throttled him into the boards. And Matthews was slow to get up and eventually did, and didn't miss a shift. But with his history of injuries, there was a lot of concern, regarding his shoulder or his arm or whatever. Kevin, the thing is that, and Mike Babcock quote was quoted today, because there has been a lot of people who are observers of the Leafs, including myself, who say that one of their weak spots is the fact that, the days of Colton Orr and Fraser McLaren and Ty Domi are gone, but there is literally no pushback on that team. If somebody tries to take liberties, Mike Babcock said, you look at our personnel, you look at what we got, we are what we are. Our toughness is our power play. Take all the penalties you want. Well, the problem is that the Leafs have the least amount of power plays in the NHL. And I remember back, in those Stanley Cup winning teams with the Red Wings under Babcock, and even afterward with, when he had, Datsuk and Zetterberg, those weren't overly tough teams. Those teams were mostly trying to avoid the physicality of the game, but they had guys like Kronwall who would keep the other team on their toes and keep them accountable. And there's nobody in Toronto right now that does that. And I think that's a major weakness going into the postseason. They don't have pushback, and there are other teams in their division and in the Eastern Conference that do.
Well, what's interesting about that comment is Babcock had a lot of teams for a lot of years that, you can't say they had, much toughness on them. Back in the Red Wing teams in their golden years when Bowman was there had Darren McCarty, but for the most part, they relied on team toughness. And what's interesting about that being against the Red Wings is one thing the fans in Michigan are kind of excited about is the pushback that this Red Wing team has. But there's nobody on it that's tough. They just play hard. And a guy like Dylan Larkin, who didn't come into the league as known for his grit, has kind of all of a sudden become their leader. When you push him, he pushes back. He's in the middle of everything. And all of a sudden, Mantha has become that. And I think that's what, you probably are going to need the Leafs to do, is to start, they're going to have to start pushing back themselves. Because, if you went after the Red Wings, if there was going to be a fight, who the heck would you fight? On the Red Wings, none of those teams, or few of the teams in today's league, have that, tough guy. You have to find. Witkowski doesn't really log enough minutes, and he's only in the lineup because they got a lot of injuries. So there's really not much you can do. And I don't know. I think it's a fair point because the Capitals were a big team last year, and I think that was lost. So I think size is still important, but to me, it's more of a spirit of your team than someone that needs to go out and rock somebody with a big check. It's just the willingness to kind of push back at every opportunity and every scrum. And I think that's what, that's what's excited the fan base in Detroit is this Red Wings team does do that. When you go at them, they just come right back at you.
And Peter, I don't think this is a concern with the Jets because you got Bufflin who will drop a bomb on somebody. You got Trouba who is a hitter. They have
Trouba
big.
Trouba likes to hit Matthews.
Yes, he does.
And but you also have Lowry, and Lowry will go in. And I mean, this is the thing, right? You need to have players who can play the game the coach wants, but also do know that there is a role to stand up, let's say. Right. I don't want to think that a player of a Lowry's of a Lowry skill or Trouba skill feels there's a need to fight as much as stand up. And if it devolves to a fight, then so be it. I mean, the thing about someone who's going to be there just to have that option is if you're not taking someone else to the box with you, then you haven't helped the process. You haven't helped your team. You've got to take someone else with you. And, a team where you have two guys who sit down or at this face off because something else happened 3 minutes ago and they're finally out and they look at each other. We're going to drop the gloves. Yeah, I guess we are. Right. It does nothing.
Yeah. And I'm talking, I mean, like Anthony Mantha stood up for a teammate in Detroit a couple games ago and unfortunately got into the fight and broke his hand. Now, you don't want that. It doesn't need to be a fight. It just means to stick up for your teammate. And I know Morgan Riley tried to stick up for Matthews, but like 3 Detroit players surrounded him. I'm just saying there's, the toughness on the Leafs right now is that Zach Hyman and Nazem Kadri. And I'm not talking about adding a 4th line guy. They need to find guys who provide a bit of pushback in their top 9 forwards who play minutes or their top 4D. And Jan, I mean, you look at the East, Boston's got that, Tampa's got that, Washington's got that. The teams that are leading contenders to go to the Stanley Cup final, they have the skill and they have the pushback.
And that just gets into roster construction. I mean, and again, I don't think we're going to say Toronto's a quote-unquote soft team, but they have skilled players.
Right.
But their skilled players aren't one, as you talked about, have the grit and the pushback associated with them, which is why, if anything, Toronto and Dubas are going to have to look towards the deadline to get a physical 4th line type winger and probably a 3rd pairing or upper defenseman who's got that kind of bite that can protect Matthews. And again, Matthews is okay to protect himself, but you want somebody that if somebody's taking a shot at your guy, you're going to respond accordingly. And granted, as Kevin said, it needs to be a team thing also, but the team that you have around you, are you going to have guys like Marner and Nylander and Tavares and Marlowe really responding? Even Brown and Hyman aren't guys that are really going to have a tremendous response associated with it. Same with the blue line. So, as you said, it is a team that's lacking that kind of functionality on the roster, and it is something that they'll add. And if it is something based upon the cap rise and they can get somebody that's got more than 1 year, is not an expiring player, I think they're going to go ahead and do it. I'm not saying to just add a guy to add a guy. You got to add a guy that fits well into the roster, but it is. I think you're going to have to remediate come playoff time, or as you said, Chara and the other guys are going to take liberties with Matthews and the more skilled players in the playoffs where everything's a bit more physical anyway.
Yeah. Sort of related to this, Kevin, I wanted to get your thought on it. There was a lot of hue and cry last weekend, and I was one of them, regarding Tom Wilson's hit on, I think it was Brent Sene from the Devils, and it ended up not being a suspension. And then, of course, Ryan Reeves against the Capitals in a rematch of the Stanley Cup final. Ryan Reeves freight trains Wilson, and he doesn't get suspended. Did you think either one of them were suspension worthy?
Oh boy, they were tough, especially the Wilson hit. The problem is I understand the protocol, so I knew you got to decide whether it's a suspension before you can take his history into effect, right. And that's where it went in. I mean, but here's my only argument for a suspension, in that even though I thought it was true what his coach said is that he tried to avoid him, but he had plenty of time to fully avoid him. Mm-hmm. Like what's it to me? The bigger issue is that what his team should be disappointed in is that he put himself in that position. That's what I would say. If I'm the Capitals, I have a discussion and say, you can't put yourself in that position where is it or not a suspension? And I know his argument would be, well, how can I play if I'm constantly worried about this? Well, that's the way life is, because everybody has to do that. When you got to size up whether or not that play is going to cost you an issue. So I guess, just to give you an answer, I would say no on both of them. But I thought, they were borderline.
Peter, I know we talked about it before, but what did you think? Did you think either one were worthy of his suspension?
Nah, not really.
No. Okay. Thanks for that elaborate answer.
I know. Kevin summarized it well. When you got to follow Kevin, like, what do you add? Like,
yeah. Well, I mean, it's those are tough. Don't you think those are tough, Mike?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I thought at first glance the Wilson hit on Sene, I thought he did not try to avoid it. It was like, oh, by the way, I just hit. Whereas when Reeves hit him, it was shoulder to shoulder, but you're talking about two Mack trucks hitting each other. Yeah, and the thing that contributed to Wilson having a concussion is he didn't have the chin strap tied tightly. His helmet came off and he face planted into the ice. Yeah. So, that's going to hurt you big time.
Here's the problem. Like, okay, what? Yeah. I mean, okay. So let me correct that. I mean, I've listened to so many arguments about the Wilson hit. I just think the guy shouldn't be playing. So there's that. He just should be done. But if you're not gonna deal with him, then whatever. I give up trying to understand what Tom Wilson does right and wrong in this world anymore, according to the NHL player safety. The Reeves hit is interesting because I wonder if that was someone else
that he hit.
What did he hit? Are they complaining that it's a blindside hit? The hit was clean the way the contact happened. But if that's William Nylander and the puck was nowhere near, you're blindsided him. And that's a slightly different thing. And we've got this whole idea of north, south, east, west, whatever. It's the waters are so muddy in trying to find ways to allow contact that makes sense by putting the onus on people for the way maybe they're skating, the way their head's positioned, what they're looking at. It really does need to sort of be reviewed again and stripped down and kind of built back up of what do you want? Use some 3D animation, build some scenarios. Don't look back at film and say, well, this, but actually build the scenarios based on what you're trying to create and then decide what the rules should be. Because, all the people tweeting out poetic justice when Reeves hit Wilson. Okay. That's fine. And in Winnipeg it was on the radio all the time and then they're the same people saying Wilson, it's completely contradicted what they've said in the past. You can't say, oh, it's great that Wilson got it coming and then go and say, well, blindside hits are bad. Like, it just doesn't work that way.
Go ahead, Jen.
So, I mean, two thoughts. First of all, I mean, we talked a couple weeks ago about Wilson, and Wilson has already gotten himself enough of a reputation that he probably can play slightly below the line where he should go and not have a problem in terms of carving out space on that line and on the ice. And he has a tendency, as we've seen, to go slightly beyond that line. So that hit, a couple of days ago was probably one that was borderline suspendable for somebody else. But when it comes to him, we're so ratcheted up based upon everything else he's done that it immediately takes on a life of its own. The Reeves hit, in my opinion, wasn't dirty. It was a clean hit. Now, granted, the karma point you talked about, first of all, I'm one that never roots for injuries regardless of the guy. I just think it's bad to kind of think about that for somebody. And then it's, obviously the karma piece is because, Wilson last year in the playoffs made comments about players needing to keep their eyes up and not necessarily follow the puck. And he had the same thing happen to him because he wasn't paying attention. I didn't think the Reeves hit was a suspendable hit. I thought it was a clean hit, granted, but maybe slightly late. But I would agree with you that the Department of Player Safety and the NHL has to do a much better job of determining what is a legal and not a legal hit and make it clear for everybody, regardless of the split decisions that are happening. And I think until that happens, we're going to have all these controversies continue to come up, including how you handle headshots, where every headshot should be suspendable. And it's something that it hasn't gotten better because there's still a lack of consistency in the league associated with suspensions. And you looked at it when Wilson got his 20-game suspension and an arbitrator reduced it. that basically just shows that there is no consistency in terms of the rulings, because I thought the 20 games was more than fair. And if that's not enough of a slap on the wrist, I'm not sure what else you're going to give the guy unless you suspend him for half or a whole season and maybe a lesson.
I think, and I'll just end up on this. I think the message that was sent by Wilson's hit is that he hasn't learned his lesson, and that I think eventually he's going to go afoul of the rules again, because that was borderline, and maybe he shouldn't have been suspended, but he's going to do it again because he almost did it this time. And when he does, he'll get suspended for more than 20 games, like, before the arbitrator reduces it. One line answer to this question to end the show. Do you have a problem with John Tortorella wearing a hoodie on the bench? Jan?
Well, he's channeling his inner Bill Belichick, so at least he didn't have the sleeves cut off. So there's positives associated with that. I mean, look, personally, my opinion, I like the coaches being dressed up behind the bench, and I think it's appropriate. One line, I did not have a problem with it. I thought it was kind of funny, though it's not a direction I would go in. Let's put it
That's
that way.
The longest one line in the world.
The clauses put together.
Kevin.
I'm predicting that it'll be part of the Blue Jackets marketing from now on. So no problem with it.
Okay, Peter.
I think it's awesome, considering the sweat and stench that comes off of the 22 guys in front of you all the time. The ick, the water spewing everywhere. Why would I put $1,000 suit on to sit behind that? Bring on league mandated hoodie wear.
Well, that's what they do in the NFL.
All I want to know is when is the Tortorella bobblehead with the hoodie coming out by Columbus? It's all I want to know.
I don't remember what the name of the coach was, but there was a coach for San Francisco about 5 or 6 years ago who wanted to wear a suit, and the NFL wouldn't let him wear a suit on the sidelines because everybody else was wearing hoodies.
I think it was Nolan who tried to do it.
Right, that's it. I have no problem.
Tom Landry and Dan Reeves. They're the last guys I can think of.
But you need the fedora.
There you go. I have no problem with it. I thought it was cool, and I hope we get some more coaches doing that. I know somebody said Michelle Bergeron used to wear a tracksuit behind the bench.
Guy Talbot, yeah.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Yeah, and Robbie Ftorek wore sweaters.
That is true.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great, guys.
Great show, guys. Thank you, Kevin. For Jan Levine, for Pete Tessier, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.